Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon to visit with Desiree Brothe from Art Cheyenne. Desiree's been the executive director of Art Cheyenne since 2004. We're excited to have her with us. I'm Amy Reese. I'm the new operations director for the Wyoming Arts Alliance and so happy to be here. Desiree has a great deal of experience, especially concerning downtown revitalization. She's worked hard to remove barriers to success for artists, and definitely leveraged economic development as a tool to fuel arts programming. She most recently oversaw the move of the Creativity Center to the Asher Building, which is located at 500 West 15th Street downtown. So Desiree is not only an arts administrator, she is an active multimedia artist and a muralist. Her portfolio includes several public significant murals and public art pieces that help contribute to the vibrant visual culture of the city of Cheyenne. We'll let Desiree give a presentation and then open it up for questions. And after that, I have some questions as well that we can visit. So Desiree, we'll turn it over to you.
Um, Hang on just a second. Amy, it's telling me I need to request sharing.
You're allowed.
Okay, perfect. There we go.
Thank you.
Make sure I get all my ducks in a row here. All right, can you see that screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Lovely. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. So yes, as Amy said, I'm Desiree Brothe with Art Cheyenne, based here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. What I thought I would do is give you a quick overview of just Art Cheyenne and who we are and what we do. I know Amy just gave me a very nice introduction, so thank you for that, Amy. So diving right on in. There we go. I usually like to start off with who we are. So, Art Cheyenne is a nonprofit. We were established in 2012 to oversee kind of public art programming and access and advocacy here in the Cheyenne community. And that mission has shifted and changed over the years, but on the whole, we've kind of stuck to sort of the same guidelines that we use. Excuse me. We are made up of a board of directors of 10 individuals, and here you can kind of see the different sectors they all represent. It's a pretty broad and diverse board. Many of us have worked together for a number of years. In fact, I joined the organization in 2016 as a board member and chaired the organization for a handful of years before I ever became executive director. So I have about 10 years experience myself watching this organization grow, and a handful of these individuals have been with me along the way. We are staffed pretty bare bones. So I'm the only full-time staff member. And then we have Toddy, who is our program manager, mostly overseeing the stuff here at the Cheyenne Creativity Center. And then Jolynn, who is our content manager and oversees all of our social media and different outlets. Most of our work falls under 5 different program types. And so I'll go through these in a little bit of detail. And then we also, of course, because we don't do enough, have a few other things that we oversee or are otherwise engaged with as well. So I'll kind of walk you through some of these things. The first one is the Cheyenne Art Haus. This is a mobile art house, or mobile art gallery, excuse me. It was literally built in a tiny home. So we worked with a company out of Olathe, Colorado. They are, of course, used to building maybe more stationary tiny homes, but they helped us kind of figure out the engineering of how to put this structure onto a trailer that would then be moved around to multiple locations. The Art Haus is celebrating 5 years this year. And so in that time, the way we've utilized the Art Haus is to take it to different events, activities, and programs, mostly around Cheyenne and Laramie County. We have traveled to Laramie and we have traveled to Greeley. It's a 24-foot long, very tall thing to take down the highway, so it's not always the most fun thing to drive outside of city limits, but it is doable. The Art Haus season runs May through October, so we're gearing up for our 5th season and making some plans for some different things. The shows within the Art Haus rotate monthly. We added workshops last year, so certain events and activities that we set up for will also add a workshop feature as well. Let's see, making sure I said all the things I wanted to there. Perfect. Next, we have the Cheyenne Art Walk. This is perhaps one of our longest running programs. The Art Walk actually predates Art Cheyenne in just sort of overall accessibility. There were a few different versions over the last 20 years. The iteration that we see today, which is a single day once per month, is about 15 years old, celebrated 15 years last year. We recently moved the Art Walk to Second Friday. This has really helped a lot of us hosting events, have some more time at the beginning of the month to get our show ready and get things out there. It also allows individuals from other communities to come and visit our art walks, since traditionally most art walks take place on the first Friday. So it's been a very good, positive move for us over time. Right now, we have 12 participating venues. We average between 1,200 to 1,800 attendees per year. Sort of depends on the activities and what's going on. The venues work really well together at creating programming and coming up with whatever their next ideas are. Cheyenne Arts Celebration is also one of our longer standing events. This was begun in 2012 with the local Cheyenne Downtown Development Authority. At that time, it was a partnership event and it took place on 17th Street in downtown. Over the years, it moved around. In fact, it took place at the Asher Building, which is where the Creativity Center is now housed. It was on the plaza for a few years. We tried some different formats with it. It was generally a weekend long event with a reception on Friday and then a lot of different activities and bands and things happening through that Saturday and Sunday. In 2019, we decided to kind of take a step back and take a little break with most festivals of this size and scale. And of course, as things have changed economically within the arts and how communities engage in these things, we were finding that we weren't making we were losing money as opposed to making money. Now, we don't do things, obviously, making money is nice. That's not the goal of this one, but we would like to be in the black on this one. So we took a break. Of course, then COVID happened. So we came back in 2021 with a single day event, which takes place in Lions Park here in Cheyenne. It's actually become one of our most favorite events to host. We have made it in the black on the event, which is lovely. And what people can come and experience now is from 10 to 6. It'll be on August 8th this year. Come hang out in the park. There are over 50, generally between 45 and 50 artist vendors to shop. We have musicians programmed, generally between noon and 6. It's just a lovely day in the park. And we have a few new additions up our sleeves this year. I'm not quite ready to say them yet because we still need to finalize some details, but I think there'll be some cool things coming this year. Next, of course, is the Cheyenne Creativity Center. Amy kindly referenced this in her introduction. So with this is one of our newest programs. It's about 3 years old. We launched this in late 2022. We approached a property owner downtown here. A building had been sitting vacant for a while, and we really just actually wanted to run an emerging artist program for like 6 months. And the property owner was interested in the idea and said, how about you rent the building for the cost of utilities, which is one of those dream scenarios that organizations hope to land in, and we did. And it was a 6,000 square foot building between the basement and the upstairs. We ended up utilizing about 4,000 square feet on the regular basis. And so that allowed us to launch the art center that we've been talking about for years. Now, to pause the current story, what I say we've been talking about this for years, efforts to put an art center in Cheyenne began, oh gosh, probably in the 90s with a handful of groups, and different people tried some different things out and nothing ever landed. In 2015, Art Cheyenne, the DDA, Cheyenne Leads, which is our economic development organization, and a few others came together with Art Space, which is an arts conglomerate from the Midwest who come into communities and evaluate tax credits and buildings and help build spaces that are live, work art spaces. At that time, however, we did not have all the things in place that that company really looked for as a community to be able to implement something. So following that, there were some trial options. Nothing ever took root until we finally had this opportunity I referenced in late 2022. So it was really a long time coming to get to this point. We operated in that space for 3 years. We actually just moved this January. In that space, we had a gallery, a gift shop, we had workshop space, and then we had artist studio rentals. In our new space, we're a little bit smaller. We have about 1,300 square feet, so we definitely had to do some creative reconfiguring, but we still do the gallery and the gift shop, and we still host workshops. Unfortunately, we were not able to maintain our studio space. There just wasn't quite enough room and enough also room in the budget for some of those things too. Then finally, one of our last big program areas is public art. This is sort of the newest program that we have. New in that, yes, we had an MOU that we started in 2019, but again, kind of going back to what was happening in 2020 and 2021. Gaining an MOU is one thing, and then how you implement anything within that during a pandemic is another. So it's taken us a little bit to sit down and really write out what this program means. Ultimately, what our MOU with the city of Cheyenne states is that we are kind of the overseer of public art in our community. That involves database management, asset management, maintenance, things like that. As we have grown into that role over the years, I'm actually kind of glad we have an opportunity to step back and look at this holistically and critically because we have some really wonderful partners with the Community Rec and Events Department at the city, Visit Cheyenne, our local tourism agency, and a handful of others who have implemented or otherwise been a part of public art. And I think now that we've had some time under our belts, we can really build a program that makes sense. And that is what I'm in the middle of working on in the next couple of weeks, actually. When we look at our public art assets, there's a QR code in the top right corner of your screen. That will take you to a public art map. We launched this last summer. There are over 250, and I'm sure that number is probably, I don't, it's multiple. It's over 250 is what I'm trying to say. Public art assets in our community. And I'm sure there's some that I've missed. But this encompasses everything from the Capitol Avenue Bronze Project, all of the different murals people can see downtown, all of the big booths that are everywhere. The kinetic art program isn't out and about anymore, but we did have a kinetic art program, and information about that is on our website. The same with the public pianos program, which is no longer in existence, but there's information out there. So a ton of different assets you can take a look at, and we are still identifying how we want to engage with that in the future. Like I said, we have a handful of other things that we do. This is an effort that we have been working on for 3.5, 4 years now, is the Arts and Aviation Center. So we have an airport terminal that was built, actually in 1960 is when it opened. It is a special airport in that it's a hyperbolic paraboloid roof, which is that swooping roof structure that you can see at the top. It is one of three in the nation with that particular type of roof. So when we look at historic preservation, there's a lot here to preserve. This terminal went essentially the airport built a new terminal, and in 2018, this terminal was sort of set aside for the new terminal, and so they are not using this as an airport terminal anymore. The building has set, the airport maintains it to some degree, but it also needs some work as well. So our former executive director, Bill Lindstrom, and I approached the airport director in early 2023 and said kind of, hey, what would you think about turning this into an arts center? And so he was into the idea, thankfully. And we went out for an NEA Our Town grant and received grant funds. And through that, we were able to hold some community listening sessions, bring some people into the building to do tours, update the engineering and the EPA studies and some of the different things that we really needed to look at this structure more holistically. And everything was moving along really well. However, with any project like this, and especially given our national and statewide economic situation, projects like this have gotten a little bit harder to do. So our next steps, really, we kind of see this, and I realize it says 3 phases there, but it's sort of like 2.5 for the juncture we're at. The first one is core infrastructure. So core and shell for this building need to be completely redone, HVAC. The windows, while will maintain historic integrity, there needs to be more efficient glass put in. The roof work needs done, and that and the canopy, which, if you can see my little cursor, this is the canopy here. It's sort of an awning-like structure out front of the building. So all of that will be done this year. Core and shell as a whole needs to happen before anyone can move in and inhabit the building. That is about a $4 million project. We had put in for a bid for 6 penny funds to be able to cover the core and shell, and unfortunately, out of all the projects that were selected, this was not one of them. So we're sort of back to how do we engage with this building and tackle a project of this scale. For 2026, we have a handful of other things we're looking at. So I've been engaging in a few different opportunities, one of which is the Ag and Art Tour. This is a partnership with the UW Extension. It happened around 3 different counties last year, and they brought it back to our county and a handful of others for this year. So it will take place in September. I think September 12th is our date, but I could be wrong there. And so for this, we just kind of partner to help find artists and vendors and other things around our community to be able to take part in that event. It will be held at 3 to 4 different ranching and ag-based businesses. Excuse me. The next piece, which takes a lot of my time, and I don't mean that in any negative way, other than it does take time because a lot of people are interested and engaged with public art investment. So, kind of coming back to those guidelines and how do we work with some of those things. We've had a lot of partnerships come forward in the last year for a variety of murals are almost always the projects that come forward, but there's a handful of others. So, we have 2 giant water towers north of town. Some partners came together to help implement that project last summer, and we supported that through some efforts. More bronzes will be placed this summer, so we always help support Harvey DeSelms and his effort behind that. I'm actually been working with our Greenway System committee and our Leadership Cheyenne class for a new mural project that'll be going in. So there's always little things like that that crop up. And finally, one of my favorite ones that I'm super excited about is this September 19th and 20th. We will be launching what we're calling the Cheyenne Studio Tour. So this will be a self-guided studio tour of different individual and group, visual artists, musicians in music spaces, cultural institutions such as the Civic Center, LCCC, our Creativity Center, things like that. And the idea is that as the general community member, you can go in and see people's creative spaces, talk to them about their process, understand what they do day to day and how it affects, their livelihood, how the art gets made, that sort of thing. It's always fun to see people's creative spaces. So that's sort of goal one. But goal two is also an advocacy effort to work with our local elected officials and specifically tour them into some key locations to have them start to understand what it takes to be a part of the creative economy. So I'm really excited for this one. The applications are out there. So if you're in the Cheyenne or Laramie County area, please apply. We'll be putting a little bit more out publicly in the next couple of weeks or so, but this is on our website. Like any organization, when we look ahead at future growth, a lot of it right now is around sustainability in every area of everything that we do. So, with some of the changes that we've had, and certainly, like I've mentioned, national and statewide economic situations being adjusted, sustainable funding has been one of our prime focuses as a board and as an organization, honestly. We're certainly not the only ones around the state kind of looking at this holistically and thinking broader about how do we grow our fund, how do we grow our donor base. And so that's been really heavy as far as our conversations go this start of this calendar year. Along with that, of course, comes sustainable operations and sustainable growth. I would love to have more full-time folks here with me. That would really make everything a lot easier and would help spread that wealth a little bit in terms of the work. So, looking at how we can make that happen in our future alongside fund development. And of course, sustainable programming. Programming has always been at the heart and soul of Art Cheyenne and what we've done best through the years. But in order to keep that up, obviously, it takes both human and financial capital. So, kind of looking forward at what those things mean for us. And with that, that was a very quick down and dirty overview of Art Cheyenne. This is my contact information. If anybody needs it or has any questions, I can also post it in the chat. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing so that we can interact together.
Desiree, thank you so much for your presentation. I think it's really important in this arts and economic climate that we look at local examples of success and understand how everyone throughout Wyoming in their local communities who are advocating for the arts or performing or creating um, all of us coming together create a statewide influence that elected officials and others are starting to really take note of. I see especially your art walk as an event that's very long-standing, very successful. Thousands of people attend the art walk every year, and the people coming spend money in our community and kind of that hard data that we can see through some of the tourism and Visit Cheyenne efforts and collecting definitely shows us that events like these do create revenue. They create jobs. They create not only economic revenue, but tax revenue for the state. And so, how do you see kind of other communities throughout Wyoming kind of taking the lead that Art Cheyenne has provided? Um,
That's a good question. And I have to apologize if you can hear dogs in the background. We have a dog wash next door, so sometimes it gets a little buoyant. Um, but it's a really good question. And I actually, so while I've been in the arts for most of my life in some capacity, one of my longest standing career paths was in community and economic development as far as downtown revitalization goes. And through that, I worked at the state level working with a lot of different organizations. And I think what it often comes down to, not only with Art Walk, but trying to pull any community effort together, is somebody just has to do it. And I think we're always waiting for it to happen. And we talk about in our communities how it would be a good idea if. And I think, there's a ton of people who sit around kitchen tables or bar tables or restaurant tables, wherever they are, and they talk about those things and the things they would want to see. But that next step is really just doing it and making it happen. And that's how the Art Walk started, was a number of years ago. Georgia Roswell, Harvey DeSelms, a handful of others of our most longstanding arts folks here in town sat down and started that event. And eventually, like I said, it sort of took off to kind of have a more strategic directive and something more organized. Um, but when you start pulling those things together and you take the time to build those things in your own community, our electeds, I would like to think, and perhaps this is Pollyanna, our electeds can't help but take notice because these things start to change the look and feel of our community. People start talking about activities that are taking place. And I think that that is where that important piece comes in, is it's just these simple little changes and taking those steps to make them happen. I hope that answered your question.
I love hearing your perspective, especially because of your experience working with a number of states' arts organizations. I'm curious about I grew up in Wyoming. I'm a Wyoming native. I've been in the arts and museums and culture my whole life as well, Desiree. And I think that probably we both can remember a time when the arts weren't so thriving, especially during my youth. I was fortunate. I had great art classes through high school and then through college. But there wasn't a lot of public art, hardly existent events, things for youth to attend, classes, engagement. I'm wondering, how do you see some of what Art Cheyenne is doing and other agencies around the state further engaging our youth and providing the vibrant art and culture so that they want to remain and celebrate Wyoming?
This is, I think, one of my favorite questions you put down and proposed when we were discussing today's conversation. And I'm going to answer it from two perspectives, from Art Cheyenne and then from my own personally. So I grew up in Greeley, Colorado, which is just about an hour south. Not dissimilar in terms of it's very ag based. There's a lot of rail. In fact, more ag and rail than I think we could argue the rail point. But either way, it's a similar community, bigger population. Certainly, demographics are far more diverse. But growing up there, which would have been in the, let's say, throughout the 90s, early 2000s, would have been some of that prime time. Um, there wasn't much of an arts environment at that time. It really had to shift and change, and a lot of that unfortunately happened after I left and moved away. But what was available to me was a handful of galleries. Of course, we had the colleges, and those had some things to them. But as a young artist looking around trying to figure out where I fit, my particular genre never fit anywhere. I'm not a Western artist. I'm not a contemporary Western artist by any means. Yes, I live in the West, but when we talk about Western artists, that's very clearly a very specific pathway and genre. And that was nothing I was ever able to fit into. And then fast forwarding myself into where I'm at today, I'm not sure moving to Cheyenne changes that necessarily, But what it does is it gives me the opportunity with Art Cheyenne to be able to create some of those pathways for kids that were like me trying to find their place to be. And where does that exist within the community? So a lot of our work with Art Cheyenne, and because I glazed through everything quickly, I didn't talk about this, is around emerging artists. For a long time, we really focused on emerging musicians. And once that took off, and we had places like the Lincoln come in, and the Civic Center started doing different programming, and LCCC started doing some different programming, we were able to take a step back on that and kind of come back to emerging visual artists. And the way we categorize that is not only our youth coming out of high school or coming out of college, but it's oftentimes a lot of older adults who are retiring or at a different stage in their life and they're coming back to the arts. And so when we look at emerging artists, we kind of look at that bigger than just our youth. But when we do look at our youth, it still comes back to that question: how do they see themselves in the community? How do they find their place just by engaging that way? And that's still hard. Here at the center, we have space for students to show and share their work and sell it. We have done different types of classes targeted at that group. We partner with all of our high school art teachers and the LCCC teachers on a wide variety of programs and things. Last night, I was actually at the Capital City Art Show Awards, where we awarded a $500 scholarship to a student. We're always trying to get in front of them as much as possible. It's still tough because the overall answer is you have to create that environment and then step away from it for them to feel like they can ease into it. And I don't know if we've had full capacity to do that yet. But I think those are the things. So now I'm just blabbling. So what I will say to summarize is you have to create a place where the youth can see themselves and they can envision that future, and you have to help them understand what that path is. And then I would also argue you have to provide more than the standard answer about a career path. When I was a kid, it was either museum studies or teaching. So I went into teaching. If somebody would have told me arts admin was a job, or the different types of things you could do in museum studies, or the variety of other things that exist around the arts as a career path, I would have been so happy and would have ended up here sooner. But I think that's a thing I talk to students about a lot too.
Thank you. I think one of the things that struck me about what you were saying is how Art Cheyenne sort of provides a classroom where these students can be outside an academic setting, so maybe a little bit more free form, but it sort of turns that space into a venue where they can learn and grow professional skills that they can take into future careers.
Mhm.
I'm similar to you. BFA in fine art and then American Studies with a focus on museums.
Mhm.
But there's a wide variety of art careers now. I always thought art therapy, everyone was like, well, the only thing you can do is art therapy. But I
Yeah.
love seeing the vibrancy you're bringing to Cheyenne's youth culture. Um, I wondered if you might talk about the mural project a little bit more and maybe about some of the ones that you've been involved with specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. That is our longest standing public art project when we look at the big picture of Cheyenne. And a little story, I don't talk about it often because it's just weird, but our mural program started back in 2015 when I was at the DDA. So I worked with for our Downtown Development Authority for about 3.5 years the first time around. I came back later. So we launched our mural program in 2015, and the first two projects that came to light were actually, if you've ever been in downtown Cheyenne, go behind the Paramount Cafe. There's a tall, giant one of a bison playing a guitar by local artist Jordan Dean, and then there's a smaller one of a piano with a backstage environment by Laramie artist Dan Toro. And those were the first two pieces that we put in outside of the well-known cherub mural that's, is of course as you're coming down the viaduct, and maybe a handful of smaller other pieces. And that program just sort of took off over the years as either myself with DDA or myself with Art Cheyenne or wherever was able to gain funding and then approval of, certain buildings and obviously taking historic buildings into context and things like that. Later in 2019 through about 2022, I partnered with our tattoo festival that would happen in July, and Eddie Fernandez, who was the leader of the Paint Slingers effort. And so we worked together and had kind of a mural festival weekend for those years. And we brought in artists from all over the place, as far as New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, of course, and then our locals too. And everybody just spent the weekend painting on different walls. So that's how we so quickly gained as many murals as we did. Currently, and I kind of reference this, most of our murals are really partnership projects now, people who are interested in coming back. So we've kind of gone away from some of those bigger efforts and moved more towards these. The reason I bring all of that up is not only to give a history about our mural program, but also to say the last few years have afforded me more time to be able to take personal time at working on murals. And so, to Amy's point, I have, oh, I don't know my count, maybe 6 or 7 around town, I would say. They're not all, they're certainly in public spaces. They're just not all visible. For example, I have one at the animal shelter. If you go to look at kitties there, which I highly recommend, you walk into their like cat enclosure area, and it's down like a long 50-foot wall. And what it is we used it as a fundraiser for the shelter. So I painted people's pet portraits. And the way they sit on the wall is they're splayed out like if you were to scatter photographs on a table. So that's how those look. And they're very bright and vibrant. My mural style tends to be super bright colors, something that's impactful and eye-catching. I have some that I've partnered with businesses on. Behind Eclectic Elephant, which is an antique shop, that was a community mural project where I sketched the outline of the concept on the wall and then blocked it out like a paint by number. And for an event that we had over a single day, people could come paint. And then the last one that I'll reference is I have Blue Raven Brewery right after they came under their current ownership, reached out and asked for a bird mural on their brew house and back. Well, one of my specialties is birds. I paint almost primarily birds and do a lot of artwork around birds, both symbolic and realistic. And so, yeah, it was natural to just go paint some ravens flying on their brew house. So, yeah, those are just a few of my projects.
So I have a question about, murals obviously enhance any community, but why should non-art businesses or, city agencies, government agencies, why should people care about the murals and what do these murals bring to enhance our community?
It's a great question, and I do get asked it on occasion, especially by more skeptical business owners. It's really a simple answer, and it comes back to tourism and visitorship. So, with all of the public art pieces that I've mentioned, our murals in particular have garnered interest through Forbes and a handful of other entities who have visited Cheyenne, not just as travel writers, but as individuals themselves. And have started to put Cheyenne on the map when we look at public art assets. It becomes a tourism component. People come here, yes, to see the West and yes, to do all of the things that they come to Cheyenne to do, but then the public art piece both becomes unexpected and or something that they can take extra time with. So it's really it comes down to that simple economic development of getting people into the community and wandering around and looking at things, which sounds super simple, but I mean, it takes a little time to get there for sure.
Thank you.
You're
I'm
welcome.
wondering if we could just talk a little bit before we close this conversation about something that I was excited to hear you're doing is the ag and art in September, and then also the studio tours that you're going to be doing. Both of those kind of made me recollect what Andy Schwartz, our lobbyist, was speaking about at our webinar last month. And that right now, as we're going into like looking towards an interim session, what are the things that we can do to really advocate for the arts across the state and to get people who are in decision-making positions to understand that arts are playtime, but they're not a luxury. They're something that's inherent and important to our growth as a state and to our local communities. And one of the things he said was the most important thing for us as arts advocate agencies to do during the interim is to really focus on our local events, to really make sure that we're taking the effort to bring um, people to the events, to invite our legislators, invite our representatives, our council members, escort them, give them special tours, just like you were saying you were looking forward to with the art studio tours. So I wondered if you could, first of all, with the arts and ag, talk about how you're partnering with
Mhm.
people across the state to create an event that is local, that has statewide impact. And then also with the studio tours, your efforts to really engage government. in the arts?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with art and ag. And I will say that honestly, the UW Extension gals that I've been working with really take on a brunt of the planning piece, which is helpful for me for obvious reasons. We're small staff and I usually have 90 million things going on. But that means that they act as that central hub to get everybody organized for what's happening at each of the art and ag tours. And last year, when we hosted it, which was the first year the event had happened, they were in Albany County. Oh, I don't remember the other county. I won't remember that. That's not going to come to me. But anyway, they were in another county, Park County. That's what it was. So they were in those two counties before they hit Laramie County. And so they had kind of an opportunity to learn what worked well in those counties, how people engaged, what the artists needed and whatnot before they came to our county. And so then we could work together to problem solve some of those things. And we'll do the same thing this year too, is how do we work together to talk through some of those pieces. Um, some of the, I think there was at least one or two artists actually participated in multiple of those county events. So either traveling from Cheyenne to Albany County or vice versa. I do think there was a Park County person who came down and participated in Cheyenne's event. So seeing some of that cross-state arts partnership thing happening, that was really great as well. This is still very much an event in growth. And so as we look at how to navigate it in the future, there's some education pieces that come on too. Helping some of these artists who may have not vended very often understand what it looks like to be an arts vendor at an event, regardless of the event, weather constraints, sales things, some of the art as business pieces come into play. So there's an education piece there. There's also just event logistics and setup, that we've worked with our UW Extension gals on in terms of maybe best practices and how to best place things and, where should, if they engage our trolley system, where should those be dropped off so that then the artists are front and center, things like that. So I don't know if I'm fully answering your question because I really think the answer is this is a moving event that is still being planned, if that makes sense.
Thank you. No, that's great.
Perfect.
That's great.
Yeah. So studio tours, I can't answer more to simply because I mean, I have partners, and obviously I don't do anything in a vacuum, but this one is a little bit more of my brainchild, and it's been on my mind for a number of years. And this one, I've attended the Fort Collins studio tour a handful of times, and I've not had an opportunity to do the Boulder or Loveland. And I reference those because they're close at hand. They're easy to get to. You get to see how they're done, both logistically for event organization and understanding what the artists are like. And I have quite a few partners in Fort Collins that I was able to call upon for how do we run this event? How do we make it make the most sense? So those pieces have thankfully been fairly easy to put into play. But like I said, strategically, it's not just about getting people into studios to see cool things. That is obviously the most fun part, but it's also about how can we help educate our general community about what it takes to be an artist or a musician or to run a space. I had a conversation with our Civic Center folk yesterday about this thing, and I'm like, yeah, nobody ever understands that regardless of the event, we need 20 people on staff to do this thing. It doesn't matter what it is. Those are the types of things that build awareness. And it starts at that community level in our general public because it can spread from there. And then, of course, helping them to understand and see that education can help inform the general constituency, which then works its way up to our electeds. And like I said, we will target that. So I have good working relationships with a lot of our city council members, and then our county commissioners. And so because of that, they'll be our low-hanging fruit to invite to tours and do things. We will, of course, invite our state folks and hope that they will come and take part. We are working on honing those relationships to make sure that everybody feels comfortable in coming and spending time together. I will leverage some of my board members and myself to give some of those tours throughout the weekend. And make sure that everybody has at least an opportunity to see 2 or 3 different locations and ask some questions. And we'll be strategic too. We'll pick locations that have some of those economic drivers in place that can be well-rounded. So, yeah.
Well, Desiree, thank you for being with us this afternoon for our online arts and culture series. And just very commendable the work that you've done. And Cheyenne really has blossomed into a art hub, artist hub. So we appreciate Art Cheyenne's role in that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was nice to chat today.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.